What about, let's move on quickly to renewable energy. Your opponent has mentioned some figure of how many times he alleges you voted against renewables when you were in Congress. Your website, on the other hand, mentions several votes in favor of incentives for solar, for ethanol, for a couple other things. What is your record regarding clean energy, and are you a late convert to subsidies for clean energy? And how does subsidies with clean energy, since you say you are in fact in favor of them, how does that comport with your general attitude against government, intervention in the marketplace, and against government subsidizing certain forms of
I'm against
businesses?
government intervention in the marketplace from the standpoint of government ownership or government control of the private means of production. Generally, I'm not out of hand opposed to incentives. I mean, listen, you look at my record going back to the years I was in the state legislature. You'll see lots of prudent incentives with respect to research and development. I served on the KD board, remember that, Colorado Advanced Technology Institute, which was nothing more than a public-private partnership to get public dollars invested in our research universities in a way that was designed to effectuate technology transfer. And that is essentially a subsidy for emerging technologies in the marketplace. But the goal is always to utilize is to try to work in tandem and in partnership with those in the private sector and political leaders to try to anticipate where future markets are going to exist and help jumpstart and provide your state with a competitive edge in order to win, and when at that point in time when that marketplace emerges. So, coming to renewables, I guess Udall's at a distinct disadvantage now because he voted against renewing the renewable tax credits just last week. And that is the biggest, most important aspect of encouraging renewable energy in the country. Now, I'm not going to
Now, was that around when you were in the Congress?
Oh yeah, I voted for it.
You voted for it?
I voted for it, yeah. And I voted once against it. And the reason I voted against it is the same reason Udall presumably did last week. Now, I'm not going to go around bashing Udall and saying that he went to Washington last week and voted against the renewable energy tax credits. But you know what happened when that bill came over from the Senate. The tax extenders package was folded into the bailout, and so there were a number of tax credits and tax issues that were folded into the bailout. So, if Udall wants to play the same game, if I were inclined to play the same game with Udall that you say he has been playing with me, at least enough to get you to ask the question. You could make the same point when Udall said, maybe you did already, gee, Mark, you voted against renewable tax, extending the renewable tax credits last week.
So the point for readers and for viewers, your attitude toward renewable energy and government,
of course,
and government subsidies.
But that would be the only difference. Is there were listen, there's numbers of votes that take place where you have. I mean, I'm decidedly in favor of renewable tax credits, but I assume that what he's talking about is some bill where tax credits were a part of something larger or some larger amendment that involved some other things that I may have voted against.
Have you had second thoughts in recent years about ethanol as it's become more controversial given food prices, et cetera? Because obviously that wasn't a factor back during the period you served in Congress when you were supporting ethanol, but you still point to those votes as something positive. Right. So I'm just curious. Not
second thoughts, but then I had the same approach and attitude about renewable. Now I've been in a renewable energy business right over here for the last 6 years until I left to run this campaign, and so I've been on the side of renewable energy development in the public sector and private sector. But the approach is the same. Once again, an incentive in order to help, an incentive makes sense, in my estimation, from the standpoint of helping a new and emerging industry get to that point where where it becomes commercially competitive. And ethanol is probably there right now. I have no reservations at all about decisions made 10 years ago that were designed to take an industry that was really brand new, bunch of scientists in college campuses and working with corn growers and others, trying to contemplate putting a new fuel on the marketplace for consumers to consider purchasing. But once that once that product gets to the marketplace and is commercially competitive, that is the point in time you start backing off the subsidies and saying, now you're on your own. And we will get to that point with renewables too. I mean, listen, I've been in the wind power business. We are still not to that point where wind-generated electron is commercially competitive with a coal-fired or gas-fired plant-generated electron. But it's close. That 1.8 cent per kilowatt hour credit is something I support, something we've used. But here's where I believe Udall's cheerleading falls short of actual industry leading in this area. One is that credit is extended typically 1 year at a time. And I think Congress ought to stand back and ask the prudent question, do you really believe this credit is going to be gone 10 years from now? And I think the answer is no. The credit will be here 10 years from now. If that's the case, what I know from financing, working at a company that finances these projects myself, is if you could just extend that credit for 10 years, I'd accept 5 years would be a victory. Every time that credit gets to the point of uncertainty about whether it will be extended, the cost of capital in order to build a new wind power project goes up a few percentages of a point. And the Congress ought to be fighting for certainty and predictability on renewable tax credits. If that can be accomplished, trust me, this will generate hundreds of billions of dollars in private capital for construction of new projects. That's the effect of just going back and saying, we'll extend it for 1 year, and then we'll extend it another year. And then they go on vacation and it doesn't get extended, and everybody's wondering, is it ever going to get extended? And that just causes havoc in the financing side of renewable power projects. Secondly, I don't want to get too deep into weeds on this, but there is an inherent flaw in the credit, and that is you can only use it if you have massive quantities of income. And that is why almost every successful renewable power project in America ends up getting purchased by 4 principal utilities. Now, they're not buying these wind farms because they want to be in the wind business, although it doesn't hurt them. They want the wind farms because they can buy the credits to offset the income they're making on their gas plant. And so that's why Xcel and Florida Power and Light and Edison and all the rest of them are buying up wind farms and solar projects as soon as they're constructed. Every project my company built sold to a utility before it went online, and that's the reason. And what needs to happen is that credit needs to be adjusted in a way that allows for the individual developer to keep it. And the way you do that is you allow the credit to be sold forward, essentially, in your power purchase agreement. We have thousands of renewable projects that are either online or coming online throughout the country. They will all be owned by maybe 4 utilities if they're successful. I would rather see thousands of renewable energy producing projects around the country owned by thousands of individual developers and owners and operators that would, if you agree, like I do, that this is a cutting edge, that this does represent a significant and a growing portion of our power production portfolio 20, 30 years from now, it makes far more sense to have thousands of owners tied up in this rather than 4. Those are 2 areas that I think are quite significant.
Let's move on to another area, and that is